Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about the right to protest. From the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa to demonstrations about the environment or against the war in Gaza, more and more Canadians are exercising their right to peacefully protest. But what exactly are those rights? Peaceful protest is protected in Canada primarily by sections 2B and C of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Those are the sections of the Charter that protect freedom of expression and freedom of peaceful assembly. And this is part of Canada's Constitution. And since these freedoms are constitutionally protected, all government acts and laws must comply with them unless the government can demonstrate that the limits that they've imposed on those rights are reasonable and justified in a free and democratic society. So what are those reasonable limits? Both protesters and police often don't know, and that can lead to unconstitutional police action in some cases and frustrating police inaction in other cases. Well, we at the Canadian Constitution Foundation have put together a brand new guide on your right to protest. And I have a gift copy of that guide available for anyone who watches this YouTube channel who's interested to learn more about the right to protest. You can claim your gift copy at the ccf.ca/learn/know your rights. Now, don't worry, I will put a link to that gift guide below in the description of this video. Pause the video now and go and download a copy so you don't forget. Also, remember that nothing in the guide or in this video today is legal advice. So in the rest of today's video, I'm going to tell you what, when, where, and how you can protest without breaking laws or violating other people's rights. I can't wait to tell you all about it. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Christine, and I'm the litigation director at the Canadian Constitution Foundation, a legal charity that fights for fundamental freedoms in Canada. I upload regular videos about our ongoing legal cases and about other interesting developments in constitutional law in Canada. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, hit like and subscribe below. It really helps my videos out a lot. Also, as I said before, nothing in this video is legal advice. If you have your own legal question or problem, please consult your own lawyer. And I am going to repeat that a few times in this video. Okay, so this new guide on protesting, which we call our Know Your Rights guide, outlines a lot of different issues that can come up at protests, like where is it legal or illegal to protest? Do you need a permit to protest? Are marches or blockades legal? And what about sit-ins or encampments? It covers police interactions at protests, like being asked to move, what constitutes an unlawful assembly or a riot. It covers wearing masks at protests, filming police, as well as police searches. And finally, what happens if you are told you are under arrest? That's what I'll cover in today's video. The guide gives you even more resources, like what to do if you witness police misconduct. Now, I recommend going and downloading that guide and printing a copy so you can access it more easily. Now, I'm not in this video taking a position on any individual protest causes. It is not my role to agree or disagree with your cause. It's my role just to stand up for the constitutional right to peacefully protest whatever cause is important to you, no matter what I think of it. And I really believe this to my core. So let's get into it. First, where is it legal to protest? As a general rule, you can legally protest in a variety of different places on local streets and sidewalks, but not in the middle of busy highways, in municipal parks and squares, but not usually overnight, in municipal council meetings, usually using signs, although some city councils have banned this. I think that's an unconstitutional ban. And you also can't be disruptive at these meetings. You can protest outside legislative buildings, including on their grounds, inside the parts of public buildings where you're not interfering with the actual function of the place, and in the public areas of public universities and colleges, but keep in mind that many universities and colleges are private spaces where the charter might not apply, and actually the law is still developing in that area. So where is it illegal to protest. Now, as a general rule, you generally cannot protest in the following places: on or inside private property, like an office building, a shopping mall, or private homeowners' front yards or driveways; inside the non-public areas of government-owned properties, which are those areas where a protest would actually interfere with the historic or actual function of the place, like inside a cabinet minister's office or past the turnstiles of a subway station. You cannot protest inside what are referred to as bubble zones, which are geographic spaces outside certain places like abortion clinics, churches, schools, hospitals, and daycare centers where a municipal or provincial government has banned protests due to past disruptions. Now, it's our position at the CCF that these bubble zones are unconstitutional restrictions on speech and assembly, but they have, in some cases, like the abortion clinic bubble zones in British Columbia, been upheld by some lower courts. Some municipalities also claim that they can ban certain types of speech at streets and parks. I also think that these are unconstitutional restrictions, but just because I think it's an unconstitutional restriction does not mean it will not be enforced. It is likely that it will be enforced, and you can have consequences as a result of civil disobedience. So please check with your local bylaw enforcement department or a lawyer to confirm the rules in your individual community about where you cannot protest. Next, do you need a permit to protest? Now, many municipalities and provincial legislatures have bylaws or policies that say permits are required in order to hold a demonstration or a rally or a protest. It's our position at the CCF that these permit requirements cannot be enforced in many cases, but I can't strictly say that they're unconstitutional because each law is different and most of these laws have never been challenged in court. There was one that was challenged in the city of Montreal. This was a bylaw that required protest organizers submit an itinerary of their protest in advance to police or face a fine. That was struck down in 2018. But again, I cannot give you legal advice. There may be a permit requirement, even if in our view that permit requirement may be unconstitutional. Are marches legal? You'll see these all the time, especially where I live in Toronto, these moving marches that go along a street. And yes, moving protest marches on local streets or sidewalks are constitutionally protected peaceful assemblies and a form of expression. And that's because the activity is compatible with the historical and actual function of streets, which has long included public demonstrations. And because protest marches, unlike blockades, typically don't coerce or constrain the other people or interfere with their rights in a substantial way. If you want to engage in a street march, you're not likely to face arrest as long as you keep it moving. But if other protesters start to blockade, your best bet is to leave because these individuals have in the past found themselves subject to fines or criminal charges. Next, this is one we get all the time. Are blockades legal? No. Blockades, which is using your body or a vehicle or property to block another person, these have been a feature of many protests in recent years, from Indigenous activists standing in the way of the Coastal GasLink pipeline construction in 2020 to the anti-vaccine mandate protesters parking their big rig trucks on the streets in Ottawa during the 2022 Freedom Convoy. Now, we at the CCF challenged the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act in response to the Freedom Convoy. We support the right of convoy protesters to express themselves, but the police were within their authority to remove the blockades. They just didn't need the Emergencies Act to do it. So contrary to popular belief, blockades are illegal. More than a dozen judicial decisions confirm that, and those who believe their right to peaceful assembly will protect them from prosecution from blockading are mistaken. There's no minimum amount of time that police need to wait before, slapping handcuffs on you and restoring the flow of traffic. If you blockade, expect to be charged with criminal mischief, which is defined under section 430 sub 1 sub D of the Criminal Code as obstructing. interrupting, or interfering with any person in the lawful use and enjoyment of their property. Depending on the circumstances, you could also be charged with intimidation, which is defined under section 423 sub 1 sub G of the Criminal Code as blockading or obstructing a highway for the purpose of compelling someone to do or not do something they are allowed to do. If there's an injunction in place against blockading, you may even be charged with contempt of court. And these injunctions are often obtained in places that are experiencing frequent protests. So even encouraging blockades on social media could, in some circumstances, qualify as a crime in the sense that it could be counseling mischief. So it's best not to engage in blockading. It can result and likely will result in criminal charges. Now, another popular form of protest you may have heard about is called a sit-in. There are a lot of very famous ones, like Mahatma Gandhi's occupation of the saltworks factory in 1930, the 1960s takeover by a small group of students of the whites-only section of a lunch counter in North Carolina. These sit-ins have been a really important part of a lot of civil rights movements. But as noble as a sit-in's cause can be, they're often not constitutionally protected. They rather tend to be a form of civil disobedience, which is where people break laws with the goal of showing that other laws are unjust and ought to be changed. And people who engage in civil disobedience need to understand that even if they really believe strongly in the righteousness of their cause, they are still risking criminal charges for things like mischief or trespassing. Another question that we sometimes get is, are protest encampments legal? We've seen a lot of these, from the Occupy Wall Street encampments to the pro-Gaza encampments at universities. And generally, no, protest encampments are not generally legal. Protest encampments are a form of expression, but many courts have found that they are subject to reasonable limits, including laws that forbid camping overnight in parks, laws against erecting structures in parks, and laws against trespassing when this is on private property. Protesters can typically return in the morning to the same site and engage in a peaceful protest, but those who stay overnight may face arrest. And that's true of a public park as well as of a private university. Courts have typically found that universities are entitled to enforce trespass laws against campers or people who are engaging in an encampment protest, both in cases where the university is found to be part of the government, so that the charter applies, or even where the university is considered private, so that the charter does not apply. Okay, now let's get into police interactions. And again, I'm not giving legal advice. This is information. And remember, if you engage in civil disobedience, there is a risk you will be arrested and face charges. If you are, you should get a lawyer, which can be expensive. And we at the CCF do not represent individuals who are charged with criminal offenses. So let's get into some common police interactions at protests. First, do you have to move if the police tell you to? The answer is, it kind of depends. Police are allowed to arrest a person for a breach of the peace if they have reason to believe that that person is about to act out violently. But on the other hand, there is no common law power to arrest a provocateur who's acting lawfully in order to prevent a breach of the peace by another person against them. So this is the peaceful counter-protester and the violent protester scenario. Even though this is the law, police often still believe the best way to keep the peace is to keep protesters and counter-protesters physically separated by ordering protesters onto one side of the street or in one section of the park, while requiring counter-protesters to stay on the other side of the street or in another part of the park. Now, we at the CCF believe that this practice violates the rights of those who wish to verbally engage with the other side, but you may not want to test their luck. There have been instances where counter-protesters have been arrested for breach of the peace simply for verbally confronting the other side. This is an unusual power, breach of the peace arrest, because it does not lead to charges. It usually leads to a short kind of time out in jail until the police believe that the peace has been restored and they can safely release the person. So please be careful when interacting with police. Now, what can you say at a protest without violating the law? In Canada, the Supreme Court has been very clear that even the most subjectively offensive speech is protected. And obviously, I think this makes sense because the entire point of free speech is to allow individuals to speak their minds without censorship. And in practice, this means courts will not uphold restrictions on speech based on its content, but only based on its effects, such as where speech is an incitement of violence against a group. But there are hate speech prohibitions that have been upheld in Canada's criminal code. These are advocating or promoting genocide, inciting hatred against an identifiable group where such an incitement is likely to lead to the breach of the peace, communicating statements other than in private conversation that willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group, and communicating statements other than in private conversation that willfully promote anti-Semitism by condoning, denying, or downplaying the Holocaust. Now, some municipalities have also passed constitutionally questionable bylaws that threaten tickets for merely offensive speech uttered in the streets or in parks, which they label as harassment or bullying, and in some cases even blasphemy. We are challenging one such bylaw in the Waterloo region, but be sure to consult your municipality's bylaws or a lawyer to learn if such a law is in place in your community. Another important thing to know is when a assembly becomes a unlawful assembly. Remember, the charter right to freedom of assembly comes with a caveat. It only protects peaceful assembly. So some assemblies, when they're not peaceful, can become unlawful assembly. Section 63 sub 1 of the Criminal Code defines an unlawful assembly as a gathering of 3 or more people who gather in a way that causes people in the neighborhood to reasonably fear that the gathering will, quote, disturb the peace tumultuously or will, by that assembly, needlessly and without reasonable cause, provoke other persons to disturb the peace tumultuously. To disturb the peace tumultuously was defined by the BC Appeal Court as creating, quote, an atmosphere of force or violence. Section 64 of the Criminal Code also defines riot as an unlawful assembly that has begun to disturb the peace tumultuously. So it is a crime to be a member of an unlawful assembly. That's in section 66 sub 1 of the Criminal Code. And it's also a crime to participate in a riot. That's in section 65 sub 1 of the Criminal Code. And the Criminal Code says that police, mayors, or other officials can declare that an assembly has turned into a riot by proclaiming the following, and they are supposed to say this: His Majesty the King charges and commands all persons being assembled immediately to disperse and peaceably to depart to their habitations or their lawful business on pain of being guilty of an offense for which on conviction they may be sentenced to imprisonment for life. God save the king. So if you hear these words, you'd better leave or face charges. Another question that we hear sometimes is, can you wear a mask or a face covering during a protest? And the answer is that you can, unless the protest becomes an unlawful assembly or a riot. And there are reasons people may want to wear a mask at a protest. For example, some people who protested during the pandemic faced consequences from their employer. So they may not want their boss to know that they have some unpopular viewpoint, and so they may wear a mask. Now, Montreal had a ban on wearing masks at protests, but it was struck down by a court in 2018, and I'm not aware of any other mask bans, except when you are participating in an unlawful assembly, a riot, or committing a crime. So it is a crime to wear a mask or a disguise or to conceal your identity without lawful excuse while taking part in a riot or when engaged in an unlawful assembly. Another common question is, can you film or live stream a protest, including filming police? Yes, you can film or live stream at a protest, but there are a few things that you should know. First, if police demand that you move further away from them because where you are standing is interfering with an investigation or because they're conducting an arrest, you should comply. If you do not, you may be charged with obstruction of a peace officer, contrary to Section 129 of the Criminal Code. Second, it is important to consider that police may be able to confiscate your phone if they have reason to believe you filmed a crime being committed and that there is evidence on your phone. One way to avoid having your privacy breached is to have your phone protected with an old-fashioned password rather than having it just unprotected or openable with facial recognition technology or a thumbprint, since police have been known to try opening phones this way. You should not give police your password, and you should contact a defense lawyer for advice if you have your phone confiscated. Finally, many people are under the mistaken impression that they can't film someone else in public without consent. That just isn't true. But getting in someone's face could provoke a bad reaction and compromise your safety, and that is something you need to be aware of. Next, can police search you at a protest? Typically not without your consent. For example, a court in Toronto found police had no authority to set up a checkpoint at the edge of a public park where protesters were meeting, and police then searched backpacks as a condition for entering the park. That was found by a court to have been outside the scope of the police's authority. But remember that this rule might not apply at certain events like a ticketed concert in a public park, for example. Police can search you if they have detained you for an investigative purpose, but only for safety reasons. This means police could pat you down to look for weapons or in order to protect their own safety, and they could feel at the exterior of your bag for weapons. If you are unsure if you are being detained, just ask and they should tell you. If police have decided to arrest you, in addition to a safety search, they're allowed to search you and your belongings for evidence. If your phone is unlocked, police may be allowed to search it for evidence, but police at a protest cannot demand the password or force you to unlock your phone without a warrant. Do you have to answer police's questions? Generally, no. You have a right to remain silent at all times. Police are allowed to ask questions for investigative purposes. If you don't want to speak to a police officer, just ask whether you are being detained. If they say no, you can simply walk away. Even if you are detained or arrested, you still do not need to answer any questions. But keep in mind, if you do speak to a police officer and lie, you could be charged with obstructing a peace officer contrary to Section 129 of the Criminal Code. And finally, what happens if you are told at a protest that you are under arrest? For their own safety reasons, anyone told that they are under arrest should do their best to comply with an officer's demands. Police can use reasonable force to arrest a person, and that can lead to injury. And remember, you do not have to answer police's questions. Police must tell you why you are being arrested and allow you to speak with a lawyer as soon as possible. You must be provided with a telephone to reach a lawyer and a phone number of what are called duty counsel, who are criminal defense lawyers paid for by tax dollars. And you are entitled to contact any lawyer you choose and entitled to keep calling until you reach a lawyer. I hope that this information has been helpful. And remember, none of it is legal advice. It is all publicly available legal information. There are a few other issues that I didn't cover in this video that are addressed in our protest guide. So if you want even more information, go to theccf.ca/learn/know your rights. That's in the description below, and you can download your free copy. Now, I'm curious, have you ever participated in a protest? If you have, what was it like? Did you have any concerns for yourself or your police interactions or the behavior of other protesters? Leave comments below and let me know what your experience was like. Okay, that's all for this update. Thanks for watching, and let's keep fighting for freedom in Canada.